Hi, Angie. Welcome to the Animal Turn podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm delighted to have you on the show because we're going to be speaking about a concept that I know comes up all the time. So I'm from kind of geography and I read a fair bit of geographical literature, and sometimes the word cosmopolitics comes in and out of the frame. And I've got to admit that I'm not always entirely sure what it means. So I'm really excited to learn a bit about what cosmopolitics is from you today, as well as kind of why politics in general is important when we're thinking about animals. But before we get into that, maybe we can learn a little bit about you first, and how you came to be interested in animals and politics.
Okay, great. So I guess the story is that I was doing my PhD on the topic of feminism and global justice. And I was interested in how thinking about gender injustice would make a difference to our theorizing about global justice. And so, one of the things that I argued in the thesis was that cosmopolitans, well, feminists should be cosmopolitans about global justice, and cosmopolitans should be feminists. So that was the basic claim, and we'll come back to what exactly
Yeah.
cosmopolitanism means in this context. But very briefly, as the project went on, I got more and more concerned about the anthropocentric bias in that literature. So I guess to sum it up, cosmopolitans think that all individuals globally are the primary subjects of moral concern, and that we have principles of justice that are global in their scope. So we shouldn't think about justice as being something that just pertains between citizens within one nation, but rather we can think about justice as being something which is global in reach. And in much of the literature, with only a couple of exceptions, the primary units of moral concern are assumed to be human.
Mhm.
And so by the time I was getting to the end of the project, I started to think, why, right? Like, why is it that we should only care about humans when we're thinking about justice and global justice? And the main sort of motivation, the sort of the grounds of my concern was that actually justice is really about well-being. It's about protecting and promoting individual well-being. And since we share this planet with many other sentient animals who have the capacity for well-being, then we should be
Mhm.
concerned about how our actions and our institutions are affecting them, not just the ones who happen to live within our nation state, but globally. Um, and that was the start of it, really. And I've continued to work on issues to do with animals and politics since then.
So you found your way to kind of animals through like feminist scholarship and looking at feminist literature and scholarship.
Yeah, and also disability theory. So part of my project, I've started to become concerned about who exactly the cosmopolitan individual
Mhm.
was. So who is this subject of justice? And so asking questions around what counts as a person, right? Who are people?
Yeah.
And thinking about personhood as a sort of moral category, and looking at disability theory. Lots of disability scholars have been very critical of the concept of personhood for being exclusionary
Mhm.
and for thinking of persons as only being, fully rational, for example, fully autonomous. And I think that it was through reflection on that made me think, hang on a minute, there's something really problematic going on here with sort of the global justice literature in general, that it depended upon a certain view about the cosmopolitan individual. And to be fair, most cosmopolitans have a very expansive conception of the human subject. So they don't want to exclude vulnerable humans,
Mhm.
including children. They want to include them. But nonetheless, they they only talk about humans. And so there is a kind of species bias that creeps in.